So I've got a little more work done. Where I left off, I was installing the thermostat housing, but I thought I'd show you this tag after cleaning up the area a little bit on the transmission for the get drag. I think you can read all those numbers. I'm not sure what was on that lower part of the tag. It's not legible now. So anyway, I got the thermostat housing on. All the coolant tubing has been replaced. Take your time. It's a little fiddly. You'll probably want to use some long noose pliers. Make sure you soap up the ends real good, and once you get them started, they usually feed right on. Think about where you're going to put your clamps and how you get them screwed down once they're on, which way they're oriented. Make sure you put them on in the first place. Also, try to keep all the factory protective sleeves on the hoses and where everything was bolted up and how everything was secured. This car still has a lot of its original bracketry, so this might be a good reference for some of you to see that some of this stuff is still on the car. So once that's installed, I did the fuel filter, and on the fuel filter you'll notice that on the bottom you'll have to keep or transfer that U-shaped pipe to the new fuel filter. And so I suggest when you thread it back on to do that first before you bolt it up actually to the firewall, at least hand tight. And then you'll need, I believe that's a 19 millimeter and a 14 millimeter line wrench on the bottom. Now we decided to go with a cheaper option for now. Like I said, we want to keep all the original parts, and someday if somebody wants to return it to that state they can, but now we're just going with an inexpensive solution. Stainless steel line, and on the top and bottoms there's these copper crush washers. They are not to be reused, so they're a one-time deal only. The kit comes with the two for the top bolt, but the bottom, when you replace that pipe, you need to get some from your local AutoZone. Don't forget to replace the bottom crush washer on the fuel filter. I do everything on the bench that I can, then I bolt it up. And then the top line is for the return line, and I'll get some fuel line out from AutoZone and do that up. There's some adapters and fittings that go onto the fuel rail, and we'll do that when we reinstall the fuel rail and injectors. I also installed the O2 sensors. So let's see if we can get some light on that. If you can see them right there. And I think you can see just a little bit of the anti-seize squeezing out between there. So make sure you get those nice and snug, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. I also did the rear one, which is right there. Once the heat shield is loosened up, it's actually not too bad. Having the plenum off obviously helps, so another reason just to get all these services done at the same time. So like I said, I had to modify the top of the fuel filter. I had to take a Dremel with a stone and actually cut out, I don't know if you can see that there, but there's a little U-bracket kind of cup underneath that's supposed to hold that line from twisting when you cinch down on the bolt. Well, it was interfering with that actual fitting, so always test fit everything. Last thing you want is a fuel leak or that not sitting properly on the fuel filter, so just make sure you test fit everything. You don't have to go cinching it down, but just see if everything's going to fit properly. You will run into things like this when you run aftermarket parts. So another reason why we try to stick with OEM, because everything just fits better. So there you go. The O2 sensors are in. Here's a little helpful tip. I believe it's 22 millimeter. I don't have one, so I used a 23. I got away with it. I'm not highly recommended, but it did work on the O2 sensor. You'll need an extension for the spark plugs, and you'll need a 19 to hold the bottom of that U-bracket fuel line steady, and then use the 14 millimeter line wrench to finally secure it. Use a ratchet, and I believe this is a 13/16. I don't know if you can see that. Spark plug socket, and they have a rubber piece in them. I don't know if you can see that, but it helps hold the spark plug in when you go to pull it out, so make sure yours is still in there. And what I do is I just take a little bit of dielectric grease and lube it on the inside so that my spark plug doesn't stick in there so tight that I can't get it out, or it comes out with the plastic. Just using simple NGK coppers. These are BKR 7Es, I believe, and we've got them gapped to 40 thousandths. Get a good blade feeler gauge, that's what I use, and then I use this just to separate or adjust the tip of the spark plug with this, but I don't actually use the gauge. You could. And then with the O2 sensor, this is the old one, but on the new ones, when you go to install them, a lot of them will come with anti-seize, and for good reason. Most exhaust parts do tend to seize up because of the heat cycling, so you want to add some to the threads, but I want to caution you, you don't want to get any on the sensor tip itself. So I suggest doing only about 2/3 of the threads down. Don't put any on the first thread or two, and then use it very sparingly. This is one case where more is not better, because if you get it on the sensor itself, it can shorten its life, give you false readings, and just prematurely contaminate the signal. So just be cautious when you get it in. Don't put it on the threads on the actual exhaust housing, because you have just that much more likely chance of actually sticking the sensor into the anti-seize. Cinch them down good, and you should be in good shape. One last thing, well, actually a couple things. When you put everything back together, I suggest checking all your sockets. Make sure there's no corrosion, no garbage inside there. Make sure the weatherproof fittings are still inside the fittings. And then this is one case where actually you can't hardly use too much. This is dielectric grease, and go ahead and put it into all your female sockets before you plug them in. These cars have history of electrical problems, so anything you can do to help prevent water getting where it's not supposed to, prevent corrosion, prevent bad contacts. Now that you've got all these electrical connections disconnected, this is a good time to address it. So just check over all your sockets, make sure everything looks good, no loose wires, no frayed wires. Just check everything. Like I said, most of this is in the labor of putting it all back together, so you don't want to have to do this again. For seals, any kind of seal, fuel injector seals, the coolant tube seals, I mean just all kinds of seals. This is good stuff to use. It's pure silicone grease, so it won't degrade the plastic or Delron fittings or whatever kind of seals you're trying to lubricate. Makes everything go back together and also prevents contamination. So I also use this